In the Middle Ages, anything could end up in court. Not just nobles, servants, or peasants, also four-legged creatures. And that's no exaggeration. This is the story, as strange as it is true, of a time when animals were put on trial for human crimes. There were public hearings, witnesses, written records, and executions. A forgotten chapter in European justice, where pigs, donkeys, horses, dogs, and even mice were judged guilty or innocent by real courts. And if you think this sounds like folklore, get ready to change your mind. To understand how this was possible, we need to step into the medieval mindset. It was a world where everything was part of a cosmic order set by God. Humans, animals, stars, trees, seasons. Everything had its place, and everything had to stay in its place. When something broke that balance, a ruined harvest, a bite, a child eliminated, it wasn't enough to find a cause. They looked for a culprit. And if that culprit had paws instead of hands, it didn't matter. Medieval justice acted just the same. One of the most famous and surreal cases dates back to 1457 in Savigny, France. A sow was accused of eliminating a child. According to the documents of the time, the scene was horrific. The animal had allegedly attacked the boy without reason. The sow was immediately arrested and jailed. But she wasn't alone. Her 3 piglets were also accused of participating, or at least witnessing, the act. And so began a real trial. There was a judge, a prosecutor, witnesses, and, incredibly, a defense lawyer for the animals. The verdict was clear. The sow received the death penalty. The piglets, however, were acquitted for lack of evidence, and this wasn't an exception. Such trials happened regularly across Europe, in France, Switzerland, Germany, and Italy. Courts treated animals as legal persons. A horse that eliminated a farmer could be hanged. A dog that bit a noble could be mutilated. But things got even more absurd when the culprits were insects. Yes, insects. In 1519, in the Italian village of Stelvio, farmers brought an entire colony of locusts to court. They were accused of destroying crops and threatening the population's survival. The court ordered that the locusts be formally summoned. 3 public notices were read aloud and posted on trees. When the locusts didn't show up, the parish priest held a mass of excommunication and spiritually banished them from the territory. The same thing happened in Autun, France, in 1522. Rats were accused of infesting granaries. The court issued a summons, and a lawyer trained in canon law appeared to defend them. He argued that his clients had not received proper notice because the roads were too dangerous. The court took note and postponed the case. As comical as this may sound, these trials were taken very seriously. Minutes were recorded, edicts were issued, legal experts were consulted. Some trials lasted for weeks. Animals were held in cells awaiting their verdicts. Some were dressed in human clothes before sentencing. Others were hanged in public to serve as a lesson to the community. But what was the purpose of all this? Medieval justice wasn't just about punishment. It was ritual, symbolic, educational. The people needed to see that order had been restored, that wrongdoing, even if committed by an animal, would not go unpunished. And then there was the church. In many cases, religious authorities were directly involved in these trials. They blessed sentences, pronounced excommunications, and led ceremonies to expel rats, caterpillars, and ants. It was a form of collective exorcism, tied to fear and superstition. Because behind every natural or tragic event, they believed there was a moral reason. And if God allowed a pig to eliminate a child, someone had to be judged. But not all animals were convicted. Many were acquitted, some for lack of evidence. others because the court recognized the owner's responsibility. There were even complex legal defenses with arguments like, "My client is a creature without reason and cannot understand right from wrong," or "The act was instinctive and provoked by human negligence." In 1386, in Falaise, Normandy, a sow was sentenced to the death penalty for seriously injuring an infant. The sentence was carried out in public. The animal was hanged wearing criminal attire. But before the execution, the judge ordered her ears and snout to be mutilated, to make her even more similar to a human criminal. Today, that may seem grotesque, but at the time, it was considered exemplary justice. As science advanced and rational thought took hold, the medieval worldview slowly began to crumble. But its traces, its habits, and its way of making sense of the world didn't vanish overnight. In fact, in some parts of Europe, these events continued well into modern times. In 1750, near Lucerne, Switzerland, a local court received several complaints from farmers. Some goats, they said, were becoming aggressive, attacking people without clear reason. Formal charges were brought. An investigation began. Witnesses were heard. The village priest was asked to testify on the spiritual state of the herd. One goat was considered particularly dangerous. The documents say it looked with hostile eyes and had tried several times to headbutt children and the elderly. The court's decision was clear: isolation, then elimination, for the safety of the community. And then, the incredible happened. The town council's lawyer filed a petition for clemency, claiming the goat was likely under demonic possession, or perhaps under temporary astrological influence. The court denied the request, but the very fact that it was submitted shows how seriously these matters were taken. And we're not just talking about domestic animals. In the 1600s, birds of prey, like hawks and owls, were accused of bringing curses or frightening crops simply by appearing. In Bavaria, in 1621, a town council held an emergency meeting to decide the fate of an owl that had perched on the church bell tower for weeks, uttering death-omen cries. The owl was shot with a crossbow, then hung at the village entrance with a sign, "Thus dies the messenger of evil." These events tell us not just about an era, but about a collective mentality. Any creature that stepped outside the norm became dangerous, guilty, an enemy. Justice wasn't just about restoring order, it was about projecting the deepest human fears onto something else. What's most surprising today is how detailed and precise these trials were. They weren't random. There were rules, formulas, rights, responsibilities. Animals, as defendants, had the right to legal defense. The appointed lawyer, often a local notary or clergyman, was expected to argue for leniency, justify behavior, or even prove innocence. And it wasn't rare to find statements like, "The animal acted under sudden stimulus, not out of malice. The owner failed to supervise and is thus partly to blame. The accused lacks reason and cannot comprehend the law." And often that was enough. Many animals were acquitted or given symbolic sentences. A cow might be banished from the village for 3 years, a dog chained for a week as public penance. But the most surreal aspect of all this was the theatrical component. During sentencing, animals were treated like human criminals, dressed in hoods, adorned with symbols, even wearing crosses. Crowds would watch in silence or pray. Because this wasn't just justice, it was ritual, a way to say, order has been restored. And yet, at the core of all this lies something deeply human. These trials, as absurd as they seem, were attempts to make sense of suffering. No one could bear the thought that evil might strike without explanation. that a child could die without someone to blame, that a harvest could fail for no reason at all. Someone had to be guilty. Someone had to pay. Something had to carry the fear. And so, even an animal, innocent by nature, became the perfect scapegoat. What's even more striking is that this logic has never really disappeared. Sure, we don't try mice or grasshoppers anymore. We don't hang dogs. We don't excommunicate ants. But the psychological mechanism still lingers. In a world more uncertain than ever, where blame is hard to assign, we still look for a symbolic culprit, a face to accuse, a name to give to our fear. And maybe that's the real message of this forgotten chapter in history, that justice isn't just about rules, laws, or punishment. It's also, perhaps above all, a way to process pain. The Middle Ages weren't only ignorance, they were imagination, an attempt to bring order to chaos. And that's why they still fascinate us today, because they show how little it takes to turn a goat, a pig, or an owl into a symbol, a culprit, a scapegoat. And so the real question today isn't, how could they put animals on trial? But rather, how much of that world still lives in us? If you enjoyed the video, help us grow by leaving a like and subscribing to the channel. Thank you.